The Fourth Way by P.D. Ouspensky, Chapter 13. Question. I can observe what a great deal of energy I waste in vague imaginings, daydreams, and worrying, but I am powerless to prevent this. Answer. The whole system is a way of preventing this, but first you must study. You are dealing with a very complicated machine, and you must know it. By studying it, one learns what must remain, what must disappear, what helps, what hinders, what one must remove, what one must encourage. People either do not realize that they can change, or if they realize it, they take it too easily. They think it is enough to realize, to decide, and one will change. But realization by itself will not produce a change. We have too many tendencies created in us. We must know how to struggle with them. Question. I am constantly up against my past. The roots are far back. Answer. Quite right. Only there is no direct method. We have to begin with today. We cannot change yesterday. Try to change today, and this may produce a certain change tomorrow. This is everybody's state, a condition in which we have to start, but it is not an obstacle that cannot be overcome. Question. I have been very negative lately about the conditions in which I find myself, and I feel I cannot see clearly what attitude I should take. Answer. It is quite true that in certain conditions one identifies too much with something and loses the possibility to see the difference of things. Sometimes it's impossible to do anything, and sometimes it's possible to struggle. Besides, we have a tendency to magnify and exaggerate. The conditions may not be so bad. There are many points of view, and only you can decide what the case is really like. Question. The difficulty is that I do not know what is right and what is wrong in ordinary life, and this acts as a screen or a whitewash over my actions. Answer. We cannot say we do not know. We know, or at any rate we should know. Nobody can live without certain ideas of right and wrong, but when it comes to the system and to understand the basis of it, you see that right is connected with consciousness and wrong with mechanicalness. If people are a little conscious, little as they can be, so to say approximately conscious, they have a better direction, even standing in the same place, but turned one way or another makes a difference. Question. Is it wrong to ask questions to satisfy curiosity? Answer. Curiosity is a normal thing. If it's strong enough to make you study, and if it's the right kind of curiosity, because there are different kinds, right curiosity is very important in intellectual and emotion. Question. Where does our curiosity for truth come from? And why are we curious at all? Answer. Curiosity is a special emotion which exists in each center. In the intellectual center, it's connected with a desire to know. But how do you connect it with the idea of truth? It is simply an intellectual process. Intellectually, we distinguish what is true and what is false, and naturally we're curious about what is true and about what is false. Again, only in our mind. Although we do not know what truth is, we can know what is definitely not true. Our mind is made so that we can know this, what is false, although in many cases we cannot say what is true. Question. What is the difference between desire to know and ordinary curiosity? Answer. What makes the difference is on what it is directed. What makes the difference is on what it is directed. If you want to know your neighbor's business, that does not concern you. Or if you want to know about the triads, these two desires are in different parts of centers. Ordinary curiosity is just weakness, foolishness. Question. I suppose I lack the right kind of curiosity, because I find it difficult in asking questions. Either I am too lazy, or I think that I can answer them myself. Answer. If you really want to ask certain questions, you will ask them, even if you think you already know the answer. If you try to think, you will have questions. You are bound to have many questions now, only you do not formulate them. It's impossible not to have questions, for there are hundreds of things you would like to know. So you must think about these questions and try to formulate them. Question. What does it really mean to have unity? I thought it was the same as a permanent I, but now I'm not so sure. Answer. It may be the same. It depends where you're starting from in your understanding. You may make a decision and then 2 or 3 days later act against it and justify yourself. Or you may want to struggle. Try not to do something you usually do. And when you find yourself doing it again, you realize that you have no unity. Even in our state, we can strive to attain unity. That is, collect ourselves. Or we can be dispersed and do nothing about it. Question. When one is struggling to do a job one does not like, what can one do to do it well apart from not identifying? Answer. At first, when you're trying to do a job of work, you cannot catch the right point from which you can do it, because work of one kind or another can be done only from one point in yourself, and it is sometimes very difficult to find that point. For instance, it's often like when you want to write a letter, but once you start to write a letter, let me start the sentence again. For instance, it is often like when you want to write a letter, but once you start, you may write more than you thought you could. The whole thing is finding the right point of the right center. For everything we do, there is a certain part of a certain center that can do it, or at any rate can do it much better than any other part of the same center or other centers. Question. Does doing a thing well involve some measure of subjectivity, of false personality? Answer. To a certain extent, it may be understood that way. It means that if one can do something well, one is able to have a certain standard by which one can measure both how other people do things and how one does things oneself, and see when one does something in a wrong way. If one has nothing like that, if one can do nothing well, one has no standard. Question. I have a certain critical attitude to people that I see a lot, and I try to stop it, but it has come back again very badly. Answer. Yes, sometimes it can be a very oppressive thing and more difficult to stop than people think. There is only one thing. Just look at it from the point of view of personal profit. Does this critical attitude give you anything or not? You will see that it gives you nothing. We often forget this question of personal profit, yet it is not only legitimate, it is the only criterion. Sometimes we spend enormous efforts, time and emotion on things from which we can get no benefit. Perhaps this will help you not to criticize. It is just the same as criticizing the weather. Answer. I often think that things are arranged badly. Answer. And you can arrange them better? You can struggle with this way of thinking, not at the time when you feel emotionally, but later, when you can see better, if only from a point of view that we have to take everything as it is. You cannot change it. You can only change yourself. This is the only right attitude. And if you think sufficiently often about it, this emotional element will disappear and you will see things on the right scale, in right relationships. Question: is there any way to prevent expressing annoyance? I lose such a lot of energy by it. Answer: and by expressing it, you may create cause for another annoyance. Try to catch yourself on that. When you express annoyance, try to see that you do it is not because you realize. Let me start that sentence again. Okay, when you express annoyance, try to see that you do it not because you realize that you cannot help it, but because you deceive yourself by thinking that you do it for a purpose. You wish to change things. People should not do this thing and cause you annoyance, and so on. But after you've expressed it, it may be worse. They may annoy or even more. No, they may annoy you or even more. It is quite useless to produce wrong results. If you think about this wrong result, maybe you will find the energy not to express your annoyance, and then the cause will disappear, because what annoyed you before would make you laugh. We often think we express negative emotions, not because we cannot help it, but because we should express them. There is always something deliberate in it. Question: but cannot you be rightly angry if something is wrong? Excuse me. Answer: the most dangerous negative emotions come from the feeling of injustice, indignation. They make you lose more energy, and they are worse if you are right. Question: why is it worse if you are right? Answer: because you justify it. If you are wrong, you can see that it's absurd to be angry. But this is not a complete explanation. Start looking at it from this point of view. Remember that there are many big things that are wrong. We usually identify with small things and forget the big. If we begin to think about the big things, we realize that it is no use identifying with one small thing that is wrong. And one small identifying leads to another small identifying. But again, it's not a complete explanation. Question: can people have a permanent influence on others? Answer: yes, to a certain extent they can, as much as you permit them. If you let yourself go in this direction and let them influence you, they will have an influence. But if you say to yourself, I do not want to be influenced, they will have no influence. Remember, they are machines. Can a machine influence you? Yes, if you allow it. Suppose you see a wonderful car and would give your life to have this car. It means that you are influenced by this car. And it's just the same with people. You are open to the influence of other people as much as you identify or consider. Question: in relation to work, can one do people harm by influencing them in a wrong way? Answer: yes, you can. With some people, but not with everyone. Some people are very easily influenced. So if you give them wrong ideas about the work, it may do harm. This is why, in speaking with people, it's always necessary to be careful not to be misunderstood, not to give a wrong impression. Question: would you explain why deep sleep should follow a moment of interest, an urge to experiment? And why, during sleep, all desire to repeat the experiment goes? Oh my. Let me read that question again. Would you explain why deep sleep should follow a moment of interest and urge to experiment, and why during sleep all desire to repeat the experiment goes? Answer. Every function, every effort needs energy, and awakening needs special energy. If you, at the moment of awakening, something wrong happens, if there is some kind of identification or something like that, it produces an enormous waste of energy, and after that, one may be asleep for a long time without remembering the possibility of awakening. But only if something wrong happens at the moment of awakening. And in our present state, something wrong can happen at any moment because we do not know what is happening. For instance, some negative emotion may come in and produce such a waste of energy that none will be left for a long time. So the most important moments to try to remember oneself are the moments when one is habitually most identified. For if one can remember oneself at these difficult moments, other moments will be easier. But if one chooses only the easiest moments, then at difficult moments one will never be able to do it. It's necessary to try both. Question. In your view, if a man could live the whole of his life in a state of consciousness, could he do no wrong? Answer. We cannot take such extreme cases and speak of always, but if a man were to become even a little conscious, if he were able to control himself occasionally for half an hour or even a few minutes, it would make such an enormous difference that all we know about ordinary man would be inapplicable to him. About doing wrong, that's a different question. If a man can remember himself, even to this extent, you can say definitely that he will do nothing more or less serious, without knowing what he is doing. And at the same moment, when he is doing something particularly important, he will become conscious. Question. Could you tell me the difference between two men on their deathbed, one of whom has learned the art of self-remembering and one of whom has never heard of it? Answer. No, it needs an imaginative writer to describe this. There are many different possibilities. The men may be very different, and there may be different circumstances. I think I had better tell you a story. It's an old story told in the Moscow groups in 1916 about the origin of the system and the work about self-remembering. It happened in an unknown country at an unknown date that a sly man was walking past a cafe and met a devil. The devil was in very poor shape, both hungry and thirsty, so the sly man took him to the cafe, ordered some coffee, and asked him what the trouble was. The devil said that there was no business. In the old days he used to buy souls and burn them to charcoal, because when people died, they had very fat souls, and he could take to hell. That he could take to hell. And all the devils were pleased. But now all the fires in hell were out, because when people died, there were no souls. Then the sly man suggested that perhaps they could do some business together. Teach me how to make souls, he said, and I will give you a sign to show which people have souls made by me. And he ordered more coffee. The devil explained that he should teach people to remember themselves, not to identify, and so on. And then, after some time, they would grow souls. The sly man set to work, Organized groups taught people to remember themselves. Some of them started to work seriously and tried to put into practice what he taught them. Then they died. And when they came to the gates of heaven, there was St. Peter with his keys on one side and the devil on the other. When St. Peter was ready to open the gates, the devil would say, "May I ask one question? Did you remember yourself?" "Yes, certainly," the man would answer. And thereupon the devil would say, "Excuse me, this soul is mine." Then this went on for a long time, until they managed somehow to communicate to the earth what was happening at the gates of heaven. Hearing this, the people he was teaching came to the sly man and said, "Why do you teach us to remember ourselves, if, when we say we have remembered ourselves, the devil takes us?" The sly man asked, "Did I teach you to say you remember yourself? I taught you not to talk." They said, "But this was St. Peter and the devil." And the sly man said, "But have you seen St. Peter and the devil at groups? So do not talk." Some people did not talk and managed to get into heaven. I did not make an arrangement with the devil. I also made a plan by which to deceive the devil.